What is film noir? Is it a genre? A style? Both? Or neither? Scholars have fiercely debated the issue, yet most agree that film noir can be identified by its pessimistic tone, morally gray themes, and high contrast visuals that mix light and shadow. Professor James Naremore summed up the issue nicely in saying, "It has always been easier to recognize a film noir than to define the term. Yet, despite contention to its classification, film noir's legacy has been long-lasting, inspiring modern examples that subvert its tropes and exaggerate its aesthetics."
Damn it, why are you smiling?
Well, I'm trying to look sexy.
You're supposed to be dead.
I know I can be dead and sexy.
We've seen the effects and influences of film noir for decades, in faithful recreations and biting satires.
I've heard police work is dangerous.
It is, that's why I carry a big gun.
But what is it about film noir that has critics so divided? Today, we're going to examine the elements and history that make noir, noir. Film noir is defined by three main elements: archetypal characters, high contrast aesthetics, and complex stories with unhappy endings. Film noirs feature a consistent cast of characters: the private detective, an intelligent loner who plays by their own rules; the femme fatale, a succubus who feeds on men lured into her web of deceit; the corrupt cop, a law enforcement official who's abandoned their duty in pursuit of personal gain. However, these character archetypes also appear in films few would call noir, proving that they are just one element that contribute to making a film noir. Visually, film noir is characterized by high contrast aesthetics, stark black and white cinematography, exacerbated by chiaroscuro lighting. This visual diametric serves a thematic purpose: to show two ends of the spectrum and situate us in the middle.
It's love that won, and old left-hand hate is down for the count.
Narratively, film noirs live in a middle area. There is no good or evil, only shades of moral gray. Film noir also leverages expressionistic mise-en-scène, foggy exteriors with silhouetted characters, pronounced cigarette smoke, and messy interiors with light seeping through the Venetian blinds.
All right, Curly, enough's enough. You can't eat the Venetian blinds. I just had them installed on Wednesday.
These visual tropes are essential, but not exclusive to noir. Film noirs have complex narratives with unhappy endings, splintering stories in which the antagonist might get caught, but the protagonist doesn't get what they want. This pessimistic convention isn't quite tragic in the classical sense, but it is distinctly unhappy.
Goodbye, baby.
Film noirs feature themes of alienation, existentialism, and moral ambiguity, but their plot structures are varied. Some start in medias res and utilize flashbacks to illuminate background detail, while others move forward in chronological order. Both strategies typically feature twists where evidence recontextualizes what we thought we knew, and characters return from beyond the grave.
What are you doing here?
You're alive.
If you don't get out at once, I'm going to call the police.
Film noirs often end on good and bad notes, where the main character is allowed to live, but forced to grapple with a horrible guilt. The aftertaste is bitter, all the same.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
These endings ask us to question the nature of good and evil. For how could such a binary exist when things end so murky and confused?
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Would you get a move on? I haven't got all night.
According to authors Tony Newman and Paul Duncan, not everything is about love and hate. Not everything is good and bad. More often than not, these noir characters live in the ambiguous gray area in between.
People lose teeth talking like that. You want to hang around, you'll be polite.
A movie doesn't have to be noir to have an unhappy ending. but you'd be hard-pressed to find many noirs with happy endings. Character archetypes, high-contrast aesthetics, and complex narratives with pessimistic endings are major elements of film noir. But is it a style or a genre? Pro-genre critics point to the repetition of plots, settings, characters, and aesthetics as proof that film noir constitutes its own genre. As Foster Hirsch writes, a genre is determined by conventions of narrative structure, characterization, theme, and visual design.
Mr. Warren! I didn't do it! You know I didn't do it! Nick was dead!
Conversely, pro-style critics argue that those elements can and do exist separately, in different combinations, and/or in distinct genres altogether. According to R. Barton Palmer, whatever the noir element in a film is, it can be expressed through a number of genres. Melodrama, thriller, etc. And so, film noir is not itself a genre.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Ultimately, the film noir genre versus style debate represents a greater point about how we study film. How do we historicize and taxonomize the medium? Well, we look to the past to contextualize the present. In 1946, French film critic Nino Frank used the term film noir to describe a series of 4 Hollywood crime dramas: The Maltese Falcon, Laura, Murder, My Sweet, and Double Indemnity. Frank suggested that these films were psychological narratives that mirrored real life in a way that police procedurals of the era never could. He also observed that film noirs utilize narrators to slide rapidly over transitional scenes and to accentuate the sense of living the characters' experiences.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop, ex-Blade Runner, ex-killer.
Frank's writing gave classification to film noir, but the term wasn't widely used until decades after its original invocation, when writers like Paul Schrader detailed its history in academic papers and implemented its narrative style in his own scripts. Now that we know what constitutes film noir, let's analyze where it came from. Why are the films so dark and the stories and characters so pessimistic?
I had to turn my back on the old lady, on the veils, on the ghosts, on the dead, before they all sucked me in.
Film noir grew out of a tradition of detective fiction, in which writers like Edgar Allan Poe, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and Agatha Christie introduced eccentric investigators obsessed with solving crimes.
Book, you will assist me? As the only traveler who slept in another coach, you are the only one who is not a suspect.
However, it wasn't these authors' creations that proved noir's greatest influence, but rather the hard-boiled detectives created by Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, and Chester Gould, Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, and Dick Tracy, all even made the leap to the silver screen. The German Expressionist movement inspired the visual aesthetics of film noir. Films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and The Testament of Dr. Mabuse incorporated surreal, high-contrast light and shadow to displace the viewer outside reality. This aesthetic gave visual language to German post-World War I anxiety. During Adolf Hitler's rise to power, directors like Otto Preminger, Billy Wilder, and Fritz Lang fled Europe and moved to Hollywood, and they brought their signature blend of expressionistic filmmaking to American cinema. By the early 1940s, Hollywood had begun leveraging similar cinematographic techniques to relay anger and frustration with the Second World War. Film noir is also a product of war and post-war pessimism. Noirs of this era, which is typically called the classical era, sought to capture a signature dark mood. In fact, film noir translates from French as dark film. These stories portray American society at a cultural crossroads. Film scholar and critic Paul Arthur spoke about this phenomenon in the documentary series American Cinema.
And what he discovers when he comes back from the war is not a secure place in society, but rather quite the opposite. One sees it, in a sense, as the continuing experience of wartime trauma in a domestic situation.
As women entered the labor market, jobs became scarce, and people were forced to the outskirts of society to find work, opening up new opportunities for crime and corruption. Film noir stories are situated here, within the moral quicksand created by World War II and the socio-political effects of the time. Yet, film noirs were not as graphic as you might think. The Motion Picture Production Code, or Hays Code, censored what was allowed in Hollywood films. Crucially, it stated that no picture shall be produced which will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience should never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. Film noirs showcased organized crime within urban landscapes and featured everyday characters, ordinary people, struggling with real issues. But their narratives and visuals had to comply with the code, which meant explicit content was kept to a minimum. Thus, film noirs of the classical era assumed a diluted tone. It wasn't until the code was abolished that institutions of power were more flagrantly targeted.
There are all kinds of policemen, sir. I don't have to tell you that. A few take bribes.
And Quinlan never took $1 in his
Most
life.
are honest, yes. But even some of the honest men abuse their power in other ways.
Film noir stretched beyond the American border during the classical period, evidenced in films like Akira Kurosawa's Stray Dog, Jules Dessands' Rafifi, and Luchino Visconti's Assassin. Film noir has been immortalized by the neo-noir movement, which renovated many of its progenitors' tropes through genre mashups and graphic visuals. Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville, for example, incorporated elements of science fiction, as did Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
Must be expensive.
Very.
While David Fincher's Seven dialed up the grotesqueness in a way that would not have been permitted under the production code.
Oh, me.
The Coen brothers have embraced noir elements throughout their career, with cold-blooded thrillers like Blood Simple, more classical homages like The Man Who Wasn't There, and even comedies like The Big Lebowski. We even see the influence of noir in more contemporary mediums, such as television and video games.
Seedy bars, betrayal, a beguiling woman. Sounds like something out of a pulpy noir thriller.
But what do you think? Is noir more of a genre or a style? Or is it fair for noir to be both things at once? Let us know in the comments below. Thinking about incorporating some elements of film noir in your next project? In StudioBinder, you can build mood boards to help envision the high contrast aesthetic. In the description, you'll also find links to more articles on film noir, and our video on chiaroscuro lighting, where we break down light and shadow techniques in further detail. Until next time, keep noir alive. Just don't let any matches burn down to your fingertips.
My name is Peter Parker. In my universe, it's 1933, and I'm a private eye. I like to drink egg creams, and I like to fight Nazis. A lot. Sometimes I let matches burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything.